First, I'll call the Chairman of the Select Committee, Sir Stephen Timms.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, very much. I'm pleased to follow the Honourable Member for Torbay. I thank him for the help he gave me as a Minister, and I very much agree with what he's just been saying about pension credit. I think the key there probably is for local government to work more closely with central government, because local councils have got pensioner income data. They've got the data to work out whether pensioners are entitled to pension credit, and I think if we could improve the cooperation there would be a way of making those judgments much more automatically than they are at the moment. But I very much agree, Madam Deputy Speaker, with the point made earlier by my right honourable friend in opening this debate. This debate is only happening because of catastrophic government blunders in September. Yeah. Before that, there was no issue. There was a very clear commitment from the then Chancellor, now Prime Minister, that the triple lock would be honoured. What happened in September, unfortunately, has created this very, very difficult situation that the Secretary of State rightly has described. It's very important, I think, to remember that there has been a big real terms fall already this year in the value of the state pension and of working age benefits as well. They were increased in April by 3.1%. at a time when inflation was nearly 10%, and that was justified at the time on the basis that the usual uprating formula works in that way. Pensions and benefits are uprated in April by the rate of inflation in the previous September. And the then Chancellor acknowledged at the time that the effects of that impact needed to be addressed next April. So he gave the assurance in May that the same formula would be applied again for the uprating in April. That is that, as we now know, pensions and benefits will be uprated by 10.1%, the rate of inflation in September. And as we've been reminded, in the case of pensions, that is also a Conservative manifesto commitment. But if that promise in respect of pensions is not kept next April, and pensions are instead uprated by less than the rate of inflation, it will, as I said in my earlier intervention, be almost without precedent. There's been a statutory obligation ever since 1977, defined in a variety of different ways, to uprating in line with inflation, and it's been honoured ever since in every year except one. In 1986, the rate of inflation was 1.1%, and the decision was made to uprate the state pension by 1%, so 0.1 percentage point less. Apart from that, uprating has been by at least the rate of inflation in every single year. And to depart from that now on the scale that apparently has recently been considered would be absolutely without precedent in 50 years. In November 1980, inflation was 16.5%, and the state pension was uprated by 16.5%. In April 1991, inflation was 10.9%. The state pension was uprated by 10.9%. And it's clear why there has been this commitment all the way through, because people who have given a lifetime of work and have retired from working, who've already made their contribution, there's nothing they can do to make up the difference if the value of their state pension falls. There is, I think, all of us would recognise an obligation on the state. There is a social contract to maintain the value of the state pension. And that contract shouldn't be breached because the government made catastrophic errors in its management of the economy in September. The considerations with working age benefits are different. They have also been sharply reduced in real terms this year, but they have frequently over the years not been uprated in line with inflation. As a cumulative result, according to the House of Commons Library, they are now at their lowest level in real terms for 40 years, since 1982-3. Trussell Trust Food Banks gave out 2.1 million emergency food parcels in 2021-22. They gave out 60,000 in 2010-11. And they've reported that demand in August and September this year was 46% higher than it was last year. Why is the economy failing so many? How many more is the government willing to push into destitution? The annual Family Resources Survey has started to collect data on food insecurity to try and get a handle on what's going on with the food banks. We now have results for the first 2 years, 2019-20 and 2020-21. The Secretary of State and I had an exchange about this at DWP Questions recently. Food insecurity amongst universal credit claimants fell from 43% in 2019-20 to 27% in 2020-21, reflecting, of course, the £20 uplift in the value of universal credit introduced in March 2020, just between those two financial years. Now that's been taken away, food insecurity will have shot up again. And we are going to have to raise the level of universal credit to address current mass dependence on charitable food banks. I'll give way briefly to my honourable friend.
Thank you for giving way. Would the member agree with me that it is outrageous that we now have more branches of food banks than McDonald's?
I think it is a great shame on all of us that so many people are dependent on charitable food banks, and the numbers are still rising. And we certainly must not fail to uprate the level of social security, universal credit, pensions by inflation in April, because if we did, there would be yet another big burst and big surge in demand. So that's why I think it's so important that the Prime Minister honours the promise that he made as Chancellor. And one more uprating, which can't be ignored. The benefit cap was introduced in 2012. At the time, it was based on the level then of median earnings. It's never been uprated, ever. It was only changed once in 2016 when it was reduced. And its value now has lost any connection with the earnings level which it was supposed to be linked to when it was introduced. If that isn't uprated next April, whatever level of uprating is decided on, thousands more families will crash into the cap for the first time, and many of those will find they have to start going to a food bank to keep themselves alive. It's time to recognise, Madam Deputy Speaker, that mass food bank dependence is not inevitable. We can turn back from this, we can do much better than this, and in the decisions to be announced next week, we must at the very least not make things worse.